Well, Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah chapter. Okay. I think it slipped down on me when I was sliding back and forth against the podium. Isaiah chapter 11. Now, we've been at Isaiah now since right before Christmas. We discussed a couple things early on. We've been kind of in a very long section here, long section compared to Isaiah. It's kind of a no-brainer. But we've been discussing about the coming and impending judgment upon Israel, and specifically the 10 northern tribes, and then subsequently the two southern tribes in Judah. And that the primary instrument of God's punishment for these people will be the Assyrians. The Assyrians are going to come. The Assyrians are violent and vile people. They are, ISIS has to work a little harder to get to their level of malevolence, and they're pretty malevolent people. The Assyrians were very cruel taskmasters. And so the Lord has told them, I'm sending these individuals. And then Judah sees that they have come in, and last week we talked about the cities in which they destroyed, Lachish being one of them that's further to the south, Nob, which is on the other side of the valley from Jerusalem, and how they camp and lay siege to Jerusalem, but God said that He's not going to allow them to take it, and He withers Assyria away. And that's really essentially what happens. After Sennacherib's army is destroyed in 722, pretty much the Assyrians begin to wane in power, and an upstart known as the Babylonians begin to gain power. And in 611, Nineveh is destroyed. In 609, in Carchemish, there the Assyrian army is essentially obliterated, and the Egyptians that come to prop them up. And the Babylonians come upon the scene, and that's the folks that endanger Jerusalem. And so then we get into the exilic period. So then we get to chapter 11. The reason why I want to look at chapter 11 in its totality is chapter 11 seems to kind of diverge away a little bit, but yet not. And you say, well, that doesn't make sense. I know, it doesn't. But it will, hopefully. But not. I'm kidding. Isaiah chapter 11, starting in verse 1. I'll read that. I've printed out both an NASB and an NIV, and the reason why is sometimes it's a little easier to read the NIV and kind of see what's going on, and then look over at the NASB. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, a branch from his root will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make his decisions by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor, and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. And he will strike the earth and the rod of his mouth, and with his breath and of his lips, and he will slay the wicked. Pleasant stuff. So also he will be a belt. Also, righteousness will be a belt around his loins, and faithfulness the belt around his waist. And the wolf will lie down with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf with the young lion, and the fatling together. And a little boy will lead them. Also, the cow and the bear will graze, and the young will lie down, and their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat the straw like an ox. And the nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra. And a weaned child will put his hands in the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Then in that day the nations will restore to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples. And his resting place will be glorious. And then it will happen that on that day the Lord will again recover a second time with his hand the remnant of his people, with whom will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathos, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he will lift up a standard for the nations, and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and from those who have harassed Judah will be cut off, and Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. And they will swoop down on the slopes of the Philistines on the west, and together they will plunder the sons of the east, and they will possess Edom and Moab and the sons of Ammon, and will subject them, and Ammon will be subjected to them. And the Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and he will wave his hand over the river with a scorching wind, and he will strike them into 7 streams, and will make men walk over dry shod. And there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant of his people who will be left, just as there was for Israel in the day they come up out of the land of Egypt. A lot going on, right? We know this passage. Many of you have heard passages like this. The lion will lay down with the, and I usually get misquoted a lot, and the UN uses it for cute phrases as their tyrannical leaders do other things and quote those verses. All right. Who's this passage talking about? Are you sure?
Seems to me.
Seems to you. Okay, that's a good answer. Does anyone else confer with the jolly man in the work clothes back there behind the computer?
Well, Jesse had lots of children.
Jesse did have lots of children. Now, that's an interesting phraseology, but we'll get in that in a minute here. Is it Jesus?
Yeah, describes the
I think so many times enough.
qualifications for a Messiah.
Yeah, this is the Messiah.
In Isaiah, he always has multiple meanings of everything he wants.
Well, he does. He does. Now, here's the interesting thing. Notice it doesn't say out of David. It talks about Jesse. Normally, Jesus is referred to as the what king? Starts with a D, ends with an IC. Davidic king. He's the Davidic king. But here in Isaiah chapter 11, he says, out of the stump of Jesse. Now the imagery here, last week we looked at chapter 10, and as the Assyrians came in, the analogy was the Assyrians were like a forest, and God was going to come and cut them down into where there was nothing left but a stump. And the imagery carries over that Jerusalem now is but a stump. A great mighty tree that was Jerusalem is now a stump. And from the root of Jesse, from the stem of Jesse, from the stump of Jesse, not David. You find that interesting? I find that very interesting. Do you want to proffer a guess as to kind of maybe what that might be? How about this? Walter.
Is there anywhere in the Bible that David's brothers are mentioned other than when Samuel came and anointed him?
Other than Samuel or the bout with Goliath, very rarely are they mentioned.
Rarely? Or?
Rarely. I can't think of any other beyond those two, but I don't want to box myself into a corner. And so I go, I found a verse! Ha! You lied to us! So the completely correct answer is, that question is beyond the scope of this class. I've always wanted to say that. I had professors in seminary that would always say, when you stumped a prof, he would never give you an answer. You go, Walter, that was a brilliant question, but that question really is beyond the scope of this class. And he would say it that way, and most people fell for it. I'm not really going, you just don't have an answer, and you're hoping that I will just bite and leave it alone. But Walter, early on, you brought up the fact that the 10 northern tribes of Israel went 0 for 18 for bad kings, right? In the south, they go 9 for 9. The southern kings are from the line of David. One of the indicators is this king will not be like the human kings from the line of David. He will be a shoot from the line of David. He will come out of the line of Jesse, because where do we get the first glimpse of Jesus' genealogy? Book of Ruth. And it's Boaz, then Jesse, then David, then on. There's one more guy in between there, and I always forget his name, but he's mentioned like twice, and so, he's kind of like me. I never really had a name growing up. I was always Brian Payne's younger brother, Rebecca Payne's older brother, Eddie and Phyllis's son. I know. It's my cross to bear, and I see counselors for it, but I'm kidding. So, you have 9 for 9 kings. 9 of them just absolutely wicked. 9 of them kind of okay. The best one, David. He's the pinnacle. He's the one everyone else is judged by. But did David have problems? Yeah. He had a lot of moral failures, didn't he? So this guy is going to be unlike all these earthly kings with moral failures. All these other kings with other problems. So from the line of Jesse, a Davidic king, in the line of David is going to come, but he's not going to be like, notice the language that's utilized here. Does this sound like anything of the kings you're dealing with? If you look at Ahaz, maybe I should align myself with the Assyrians because my neighbors to the north are going to attack me and then force me into a coalition if I don't side with them. But I'll side with this superpower that really it's a sign of weakness, and later on they're going to come and steal everything I have. So and Isaiah looks at him and says, don't do this. And he does it anyway. Isaiah talks to Hezekiah and says, hey, who are these guys that came through and looked at everything? Oh, well, they were from Babylon, and I showed them everything. Moron. All right? That's like inviting a thief into your home and showing him where all the good stuff is. That's why I don't like cats. Cats will help the thief load. It's funnier when you laugh. So out of Jesse's, this branch, but it's more than just a branch. What will this branch do? It's actually right there. It will bear fruit. It will be unlike the kings of Israel that kind of bear fruit, but it's a kind of a corrupted fruit. This one will bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him. Now, a lot of people want to make a lot of sand here. Well, the Spirit of the Lord, apparently the Holy Spirit hasn't been made yet, or you got a Trinitarian problem. Remember, this is the Old Testament. Is the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament as fully revealed and developed as he is in the New Testament? No. And actually, to many of the Jews, actually to all the Jews, they only believe in 2 members of the Trinity. They believe in the Father and they believe in the Messiah. The Holy Spirit, the third person of the triune God that we believe into, is actually to them part of the personality of the Father. And so for them, they would read this and go, well, yeah, that's not a big deal. And for Christians, we look at it and, well, that's not a big deal, but you got folks that want to make a lot of sand out of it. And I'll be honest with you, it's not that big a deal. We see the Spirit descend at his baptism.
Well, don't they have a hard time on Genesis 1:26?
They don't even read that. Well, they read it, but they don't see it. They don't see it the way we see it, because they don't read John 1. So they don't see it the way we would see it. And there's a big movement within Protestantism of folks going back into Messianic Judaism, which they're co-opting the name, and this is for free. Messianic Judaism used to be Jews that became Christians that wanted to hold on to their Judaism. There's a big movement now to go back into Messianic Judaism where it's Christians that want to go back into legalism. And they are actually becoming Judaizers in many cases. Some of them not, but anyhow, that was free.
I read a book on it, and they say that the hour or the we is, they call it the royal we.
Yeah, and that is a possibility. The problem is the royal we introduced that early in the creation narrative is a bit strange, especially when you take John 1 into consideration. But let's look at 2 here. Notice what he has here. The Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him, and the Spirit of wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge, and the fear of the Lord. Or spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Now, let's look at this. Wisdom. It's not just academia knowledge. We utilize a lot of these terms interchangeably. The Jews do not. We use wisdom, knowledge, and understanding as synonyms. They do not. They don't ever cross categories. They may bump up against each other in certain areas, but you would never use wisdom and understanding as the same term. We would. I mean, you're writing a research paper and you use wisdom. I had a guy who used the word view 23 times on one page. And every time I would circle it in red. And then one day he wrote the view that, and the next page he wrote the view that views. And I circled it with my red pen. I said, I had no idea that views possessed eyes. You get it? The view that views? That's odd in English. We don't do that. In Hebrew language, that's perfectly fine. Why? Because that word means just what it says. Understanding means exactly what it says. And knowledge means exactly what it says. And they don't overlap a lot. So this idea of wisdom is not simply the concept of academic knowledge. It's not simply, well, I know about God. In this case, I know about the wisdom of God and I know what it's like to be the king. No, I actually have the ability to take the concepts of what I know and be practical in their application. And so it's not just simply, well, this guy will have a concept of what it's like to be God, or a king, but not the practical knowledge to go with it. And we see this with some of Israel's and Judah's kings. They knew what it meant to be a king, but when it was time to make right decisions, they made some pretty dumb decisions. Understanding. The ability to decide various possibilities or to solve problems. Other than to go, I don't know what to do, I think I'll call on my big brother to help out. And so you have this, and counsel and strength, those two go together. Counsel, to be able to come up with complex plans and solutions to those complex plans. Strength is that of heroic action or mighty deeds. So this individual, the Messiah, as I already pointed out, is he someone that's like the other kings? No. This guy's got a little bit more on the stick that's going on here. And so you see this individual coming onto the scene. Now, if you're a Jew and you've been told that your city is headed for destruction, are you going to like this passage? Yeah, and you will. Because the Messiah is coming and this dude is smart and he's wise and he's brave and he can figure things out, and he's coming to town and he's bringing Denzel Washington and Arnold Schwarzenegger with him. They're going to clean house.
They sure didn't get what they expected.
Well, that's the thing, because they keyed in on the conquering king. See, Isaiah chapter 11, there's good stuff in Isaiah chapter 11. This guy comes with power. The remnant's restored. Nation's going to be rebuilt. They really don't know what to do with 53. They look at that and go, got no answer. Got nothing. I'm looking at this. He's not conquering anything. He's suffering. So when you read this here, notice what it says here. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. Oh, wait, I skipped one, didn't I? Notice that phrase is there twice. The spirit of the knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make decision on what he hears. So, what's the phrase out of Proverbs? The blank of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This man will delight in the knowledge of God. Why? Well, he is Messiah. He is God himself. And so this phrase is there twice to bring emphasis to this person's to who he is. But notice how he judges. Not like kings that see and hear arguments. Not like kings that make decisions. Not like kings that would, here we'll see about talking about the poor, that make decisions based upon wealthy and poor. Because in those days, if you were wealthy enough, just like today, you can get away with a lot if you're wealthy enough, right? Ted Kennedy and... Anyhow, I got to stop that. I just got to stop that. I think I got political Tourette's. But you've noticed, folks, that if you're a little bit more wealthy, you can get out of some crimes than those that aren't. And the indication is, watch this. But the righteous, but with righteousness, he will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. So how does he make his decisions? Based on what he hears? Based on what is said? Or with righteousness? So he's going to be looking at the inwardness of the heart. And the poor are actually going to have less to fear than they do under these other kings. The afflicted, he will strike the earth. Now you see, if you're a Jew and you're reading this, you're looking at this and going, this guy's coming. our life's going to get better. He's going to beat up on the bad people. He's going to slay the wicked. Anytime slaying the wicked is in a verse, they're tickled pink. Because are they the wicked? Not in their eyes, but had they been wicked? Yeah, why do you think God's sending a punisher to come get them? So you're reading this and saying, man, this is great. This guy's coming. This is awesome. Questions before we move on to the next couple of verses that I can either not answer or go, that question is beyond the scope of this study.
Yes, see if it's the other.
That's right. Questions so far? Yes,
Well,
no?
I'd like to turn in that fourth verse,
Uh-huh.
where he talks about the rod of his mouth.
Yeah.
Because in creation, God spoke, and it was so. And here again, this rod, which he said that is going to be like a tank or whatever, a weapon, it's his mouth.
Well, and here's the thing. It says that his lips, with the breath of his lips, he will slay them. Does God physically need to be on the earth to beat up on these people? No. See, this has always been the problem with the children of Israel. Notice early on, when the other people had kings, what did they want? They wanted a king. They wanted something they could see. One of the biggest problems with them falling into idol worship is they wanted a God that they could see. And the problem is, Isaiah's got some wonderful humor. As we look over there, he talks about we take a log, we cut some of it up, we take part of the log to an idol carver, and he carves it to where it doesn't teeter-totter, and he adorns it with gold and silver. And we found out in worship and say, this is my God. With the other part, we cook our food over it and eat and are well fed. And the concept that he's bringing forth is do you not see the foolishness? Half the log you cooked your meal over, and that was okay. The other half you worship. Whereas the God you serve with his mouth can speak creation into existence, and with his mouth can speak you into oblivion. He doesn't have to be there to hit you. He doesn't have to be there to deliver you. Matter of fact, he sends an angel to destroy Sennacherib's army. He didn't even get himself involved. He does, but he doesn't. The angel does the killing, but it's there on his direction. So notice what he does. I can hit you by speaking. The rod of my mouth, the power that I have coming out of my mouth, the power that I have with my thought, the ability to be able to execute judgment from distance. One of the great things that we have in our advantage as a military is we can kill from distance. I remember watching a video of the Apaches shooting dudes to a tractor in the middle of the field. How many of you have seen that one? It's Google search it. It's not a riot, but it's interesting because the Apache's miles away. And these dudes are out in the middle of a field planning their next attack. And all of a sudden, one of them just gets turned into raspberry jam. And so the other dudes hide behind the tractor. And the Bushmaster goes right through the tractor and gets them. We were killing them from distance. And it terrified them. God is far better than an Apache with a Bushmaster on it. He can get you where you can't even get him. And out of his mouth he speaks this destruction. And he can slay the wicked. Here's some new terminology here. Look at this. Also, righteousness will be his belt around his loins, and faithfulness be a belt around his waist. We're going to look over to the NIV. Righteousness be the belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. That's a curious statement, is it not?
Isn't that similar to Galatians, where he talks about the full armor of God?
Well, I think you could make an allusion there. I didn't see that connection. One of the things that I've noticed about this is, what is something that you do every day before you leave the house? You dress. And it is part of you, is it not? Otherwise, you're going to surprise your neighbors, and it'd be a very interesting Sunday morning. Unlike the other individuals that clothe themselves in other aspects of the trappings of their office, his tenure is going to be set by the righteousness that will be around his waist and the loins and his faithfulness. He's not going to be like the other kings that we have had. This king is going to be better than David. That's a lot. The hallmark of his reign is going to be his righteousness and his fidelity, which is why he can speak and slay the wicked, which is why he can do what he is doing. When you're a Jew and you're reading this, you're loving this. This is, we may go through some hard times, but brother, it's going to get up, you know. It's kind of like when you're on a long walk. In the Army, they called them ruck marches. And I never quite figured it out because I always asked, was my Humvee broke? That's right. You get that, Connor? I was a leg, so, you know, I said that a lot. But when you get towards the end and you can see that it's not that far away, it's not that bad of a walk. Oh, yeah, it still stinks, but it's not that bad. Early on, it stinks. So you see, well, we're going to go through some trial. We're going to get beat up a little bit. But this Messiah that's coming, he's going to take care of the wicked. He's going to be a righteous guy. He's not going to be like the other kings that we had who raised taxes. And this happens right after Solomon's death. He's going to be better. And really, that's kind of the imagery in Hebrews. Jesus isn't like the other trappings. He's better. He's best. No matter who you pull up, Moses, Jesus is better. The law, Jesus is better. The prophets, Jesus is better. This, Jesus is better. Then we get this interesting phrase. The wolf will lie down with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the young goat. The calf will lie down with the lion. The fatling together. The little boy will lead them. That's interesting. The cow and the bear will graze, and their young will lie down, and the lion will eat straw like an ox. You ever seen a lion eat straw? I've only seen my dog eat straw, and then the response to that is not pleasant. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra. CPS be called on you for that one. And the weaned child will put his hand in the viper's den. What's he talking about? He's talking about the millennial reign. A lot of people would go there. Now here's the question about this. Is this literal? Or is this more in the line of figurative? That is one possibility, is it not? Yeah. It's figurative language for peace. Now, you take it literally. There's another group that will take this literally, and another camp that will take this literally, and say, this is what's going to happen during the millennial reign before Jesus returns again. So we have the rapture and the tribulation, and the church is out, and then you have Satan locked up for 1,000 years, and then all this is occurring, and then Christ returns. Satan's released, and Christ returns, and that's one way of understanding this passage. That's called dispensationalism. And a few others say this is figurative, and it's about God's peace on the earth. There's a millennial reign. It may be an actual 1,000 years, and it may be a figurative 1,000 years, based upon their understanding of Revelation chapter 20. Now here's the question. If it's figurative here, it's got to be figurative in the other part of the book, or the other part of this chapter. If it's literal here, it's got to be literal in the other part. Why? Because these two are connected. So you can't have a section that's figurative in one section and quickly turn it back to literal, and then back to figurative, then back to literal. That helps us in our theology at times, but it hurts us in the way we look at the text. So question is it figurative or literal? I'll let you take a look at it here. And we'll come back to it. But definitely, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. It is to me, I would read this passage as figuratively. It absolutely should, in my opinion, especially Hebrew apocalyptic literature, because in that genre, it's not that we're taking it not literally. We're taking a good example. It is raining cats and dogs. Is that a literal or figurative statement? Figurative statement, but it represents a literal concept. Correct? Now, am I misusing that statement? No, I used it all the time. And I didn't realize how much figurative language I used until I dealt with people from other countries. And they looked at me and they go, it's raining cats and dogs?
Looking at the sky and wondering where they're coming.
Yeah. It's pouring buckets. of water. It's raining so hard, it's like someone pouring a bucket. It's a figure of speech. We understand the literalness behind it. And so when people say, well, I take the Bible literally, so do I, but I understand the literalness behind the figure of the speech. And the literalness behind this figure of speech is, this is a time of great peace. Two polar extremes. The wolf, who is known for stealing lambs, right? Or pigs, if you would like to read the three little pigs. No, okay. Will lay down next to each other. The lion will quit eating other stuff and will eat hay like an ox. So you have this imagery of the world at peace. Well, folks, I can't tell you when the world has had long-term peace, ever. In the garden, and it was definitely, but I would be talking from the fall to now. There hasn't been a time of long-term peace. And so this passage clearly can't be going on about this time period. It has to be about the millennial. And it has to be a representation of something that is going to occur in the millennium, which is great peace.
And it couldn't be about David because there was no peace.
David did his best to subdue all the great powers, but David still went out to war. So, no, it couldn't be David. It couldn't be Solomon. It couldn't be Rehoboam. Rehoboam causes the split of the 10 northern tribes and the 3 southern tribes. So, let's continue on. 19. I'm going to keep up with my pages here. And I should come with sound effects. Is this page moving along? No, my slide flipper left. Okay. That's why I print these, in case he has to step out. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. Now, why is it that these animals will lie down in peace? Because they like each other?
The Lord's going to make them.
Because the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. The world will know and have an understanding of God unlike what they have had before. We have some of that now, and where you'll have some people who goes, hey, look, there is no such thing as a millennial reign. It's all figurative, and a lot of this is going on and occurring now. And a lot of times that group gets labeled liberal. They're not. Very good conservative guys hold to that position. Let's transition. Now we transition back a little bit. We were talking millennial, now we're back. Then in that day, the nations will restore to the root of Jesse. We like this, but there's a problem here. Who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. Then what will be happening on that day of the Lord will again recover a second time with his hand a remnant of his people, who will remain from Egypt, who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Now let's go back up here to chapter 10. Who is the nations? I'll give you a hint. We've already talked about this before. We're in Isaiah chapter 9. The word nations is plural, and the plural of nations is goyim. You and I, unless you are of Jewish descent, are all goyims. We're all Gentiles. And the word goyim is what they use to distinguish between Jew and Gentiles. Goyim, G-O-M-I-M. I'd have to transliterate it. It's a transliteration of the word. And that's what it means. It's Gentiles. If you are not a Jew, you are a goyim. Well, that's interesting. In that day, the nations will restore to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. And then it will again happen that when he returns, he will then call Israel to him. So notice, even in Isaiah, there is a prophecy about whom coming to Christ? Gentiles. See, there's a lot of folks that go, well, you know, the church is kind of an offshoot. You had the Jews, had they not rejected Jesus, they could have had what they would have had under Jesus. According to Isaiah. Because one day the Goyim will come back. Notice, let's go over and take a look at Luke chapter 2. This is one of the prophecies that comes out of Simeon's mouth. Verse 29, now the Lord, it's not up there, I should have put it up there. Now, Lord of hosts, thou dost let thy bondservant depart in peace according to thy word. For my eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of the people of Israel. Where's Simeon picking this up from? Isaiah chapter 9 and Isaiah chapter 11. And pulling this forward. So you have this coming up here. And notice the consistency. The nations, then the Jews. The nations, then the Jews. And notice what happens. It can be.
Because they think that once we accept Jesus as our Savior, we become like the Jews. We become chosen people. But that's not true. We were the chosen later people.
That is one position. There is the other one that says, look, what makes a person a member of the people of God is to be a follower of God, one who follows by faith. You have a chosen people, and one of the requirements of being a chosen person of Israel was to be a person of faith. And in the New Testament, it transitions to a people and body of faith. And which is why in Matthew it talks about the axe being laid at the root of the tree. Now what's the tree? The tree is Israel and Judah. What happens when you put an axe to a root of a tree? Tree dies. Tree dies. You also have passages of the wild branch being grafted in. Those of you from farm country, if I've grafted a branch into a tree and it grows and it takes root, then is it part of the tree? It is. It is.
Fruit like it is.
It is. Can I rip it out of that tree once it grows around it? I got to cut the tree out. So you have passages like that. So they look at that and they go, hey, here is from the Bible where I see that, and a lot of times it's wrongly called replationist theology. It's not. There's one people of God. That's their argument. One people of God, and that people have always been those that believe by faith. And they go to Hebrews chapter 11, because if you look at how Hebrews chapter 11 lays out these great people, what was the thing that precurses all of their names? By blank. Abraham. By blank. Then there's the other argument that says, hey, look, there's the Jews and there's the Gentiles. And the two don't merge. And so there's two plans. Now here's the thing. The counter-argument to that is, well, now there's two plans to God because the Jews follow the law and the Gentiles follow the church. And so you've got problems that way. Both of these arguments have problems that are difficult to defend. And here's the thing. A lot of times these arguments are taught as theological constructs with verses attached, not verses that then define theological constructs. Dispensationalism is a theological construct that then you take verses and you make supportive. Reformed theology, amillennialist, historic premill, all these others are theological constructs that are utilized, and some people use them as a framework to attach verses to, or they utilize them as a framework from which they look at verses and go through. So, while some people would say, yes, you're absolutely right, that the Jews in Israel are two separate, or the Jews and the Gentiles are two separate folks, there are a lot of good conservative folks that say, hey, one people of God. And they've got their verses that back that up. And that's, and on the grand scheme of things, both have good points and both have weak points. And both groups typically look at the other one and say, you're not reading Scripture right. And so, here, in this passage, does it make any distinction about anybody? Not in Isaiah. Not in Isaiah chapter 9. And so, at least here we have that. Now, there are other verses that help lend evidence to both of those. So, but yes, that is a theological position just like the other one is. But notice here, I asked the question, is the first half literal or figurative? And some of you said figurative. Now why is it? Because then it will happen on that day. The Lord will again recover a second time with His hand the remnant of all of His people from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hathor, and from the islands of the sea. Do those nations exist today?
One, Egypt.
Egypt in the size of Egypt as it was in the ancient Near Eastern world at the time this was written? No. So, now, and He will lift up a standard for all the nations. That's again that word goyim, and assemble the assembled banishments of Israel, and the dispersed ones from Judah, and from the four corners of the earth. Does the earth have four corners?
North, south, east, and west.
Yeah, well, we live on a round ball. And so these nations, so it's a symbol that He's drawing them from nations that they know. If He were to say Russia, China, India, Britain, those people thought Isaiah is smoking crack. But if He says places that they know, which represent a great distance from which the Jews were flung, because they were flung into Assyria, they were flung into Pathros, they were flung into Egypt, they were flung into Cush, they were flung into Lower Egypt, they were flung all over the world. And so when God returns, He's going to pull Israel back to Him, those scattered abroad, the nations and those scattered abroad. Questions before we go on? Oh, that's nice. Yeah, start it normally. Let's see what it does.
Sorry.
It's okay. Questions? Then the jealousy of Ephraim will depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. That sounds like two sibling rivalries, right? Now here's another thing. They will swoop down on the slopes of Philistia in the west. Does the Philistines exist today? No. And so you have a lot of figurative activity that talks about the expansion of the kingdom, Israel returning to its homeland, the nation being brought back to its homeland. But all these nations are not there. But it's designed to help the reader know that that's what's going on. Is this a good sign if you're a Jew about ready to go into an exile? Will this bring you comfort? It should bring you great comfort. And this, exactly. And this is where the Jews get this conquering king concept. This guy, when he returns, is going to restore the order of life. Pardon me. But they'll never see it. And they don't see it. And we haven't seen it. And so, what happens with this prophecy? Is it something that God is just lying about, or is it just out there waiting to be fulfilled? It's just the interesting thing about Isaiah. Isaiah has prophecies that are being met currently at the time in which he's speaking. Then Matthew will utilize it from Isaiah 7:14. And then this passage here in Isaiah chapter 11 talks about the coming Messiah. We see Him present Himself on the scene, but He doesn't present Himself as fully as Isaiah 11 presents Him, because the one that shows up in 0 AD, suffers. He dies. He rises again. But here's the thing. In so doing all that, He begins an inauguration of a great peace and a final return. And so while the Jews took the two and did this with it, we see the text kind of doing this with it. And so you have the Messiah coming into the world and His return again. And a lot of folks go, hey, this second part is the second return. Questions? Because I got like 20 minutes. And I'm about maxed out on what I want to do. Now here's another question before we go anywhere. Notice at this time you will have Ephraim and Judah playing nicely together. Does anybody remember what happens in the opening sentences of Isaiah chapter 1, possibly 2? Anyone? That's not that one. Isaiah chapter 1. We talked about that the first time we looked at Isaiah and the irony that was about the passage. Isaiah chapter 1, starting in verse 2. Listen, O heavens, and hear, O earth, for the Lord speaks. Sons I have reared and brought up, but they have revolted against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's manger, but Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Alas, a sinful nation, weighed down with iniquity, offsprings of evildoers. The imagery of chapter 1 is he has sons that do not know. And this concept here of, hey, look, the ox does not know its owner, the donkey does not know its master's manger. If you were here the first week, this text is cleaned up. The exact translation is the donkey does not, the dumb ass does not know its manger. It's not a polite thing to be called, is it? Now, they didn't use it the same way we use it in our vernacular today, but the dumb mule doesn't know its owner's manger. And now in chapter 11, you'll see where God is pulling people back, and God is going back to do these things for His people after they go through this.
In verse 3, it says the ox knows its own owner, and the donkey its master's manger.
That's right. The dumb donkey knows its master's manger. Yeah. The dumb donkey knows its master's manger, and the ox knows its owner. But my children do not know me. Yeah. And now we shift over. Sorry, my dyslexia got the better of me on that one. Now we shift over in through 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and you have Israel totally just, we're doing what we want to do. Remember, we looked at those passages. If you knock down our walls, our brick walls, we'll build with hewn stone. That's pretty arrogant. So now you have this here. And in Christ's return, you'll see where the animals lie down with one another in nice and peace, and His children are returning to Him and know Him. Questions? So we'll jump around a little bit more here in a little bit. Covered this one. Questions? Any at all? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay. Well, let's close out with prayer, and then we can dismiss. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the opportunity to come together and look at your Word. Heavenly Father, for and a lot of times just understanding and to look at something that at times has an ability to appear unclear. How Isaiah writes 11 in 700 BC that does not yet have conclusion, and we're already in 2015. And how to make sense of how one can write and the understanding of that and how all these pieces fit together. It's still a great mystery for many of us.